Hi, this is James Cook, Assistant Professor of Social Science at the University of Maine at Augusta. And for this section of Introduction to Sociology, we're considering the ideas of nature and nurture. Now, if you're a student of mine, you've already completed an exercise in which you have completed 5 sentences that begin with the words I am. Now, if you have that sheet of paper, pull it out. If you don't have that sheet of paper, write down 5 sentences that begin with the words I am. When you're ready and done with that, proceed with the video. Okay? Having done that, look over your answers and consider, are these things that you are? Something that you were born with? Were you born that way? Have you always been that way? Or did you somehow learn to be that way? Or choose to be that way? That distinction is the distinction of nature versus nurture. This classic phrase that refers to the difference between the environment that is learned, that impacts us after birth, nurture, and the idea of some pre-existing biological essence called nature. So kind of intellectual threat to arguments about socialization comes from sociobiology, where sociobiology is the systematic study of the biological basis of social behavior. How much of the variation in social behavior that we see can be explained by biology alone, and particularly by inherited aspects of biology? To answer this question, a number of sociobiologists who are wanting to explain social behavior have looked to studies of twins and adoption studies. So in twin studies, there's a way that researchers take advantage of the existence of 2 kinds of twins. Monozygotic twins, who share all alleles because they come from one zygote that split, monozygotic, and dizygotic twins, who come from 2 separate zygotes. They're fraternal twins, and they share on average about 50% of their alleles. So there's a difference between sharing half your alleles, where alleles are variants of genes, or genes are sections of DNA that code for the RNA that makes proteins. If you share half of your alleles with someone versus sharing all your alleles with someone, and you share, no matter what kind of twin you are, the experience of being born together at the same time in the same family, the main difference is in, it's argued, the amount of genetic overlap. If monozygotic twins share all their genetic alleles, and dizygotic twins share just about half of theirs, you would expect, if there's a biological basis for behavior, that monozygotic twins would be more alike than dizygotic twins in behavior. To study this, those who engage in twin studies use a term called concordance. And concordance is the percent of the time when one twin exhibits a condition, like a disease, or exhibits a behavior, that the second twin also exhibits the same condition or behavior. Now, we can start out with a condition that is both biological in nature. It is considered by some to be a disease, and it's social in nature. It's considered by some to be a way of orienting to social life, and that is autism. Autism, which exists on a spectrum, the autism spectrum disorder, and then severe autism, which is autism in which individuals are really unable to function at a basic level in society. So for the more severe form of autism, the concordance, the percent of the time when one twin has it, the other twin also has it, for monozygotic twins is 58%. For male monozygotic twins. For female monozygotic twins, it's 60%. Right? Excuse me. For male dizygotic twins, the concordance is just 21%. And for female dizygotic twins, the concordance is just 27%. So the concordance is higher for monozygotic twins than it is for dizygotic twins. What about for the less severe form of autism spectrum disorder? Again, male monozygotic twins have a higher concordance, and female monozygotic twins have a higher concordance than female dizygotic twins, who share some genetics but not all of their genetics. So this is exactly the pattern you would see if you believed that autism was genetically based. However, there's something interesting to notice, which is that the concordance for male monozygotic twins, female monozygotic twins, for either the severe or less severe form of autism is not 100%. What does that indicate? Genetics is not enough alone to explain all of the variation in autism. Something else is happening. What about schizophrenia? The concordance is, again, the percent of the time when one twin has a condition, the second twin has the same condition. Well, in schizophrenia, the concordance for monozygotic twins is 46%. For dizygotic twins, just 14%. So it's the same pattern you would expect to see if there's a genetic element to schizophrenia. But we don't have a concordance of 100%, indicating that it is not simply and purely a genetic condition, and that something about the environment after genetics has to be invoked to understand why some members of a pair of twins who share all genetic alleles, monozygotic twins, nevertheless don't get schizophrenia when their identical twins do. Something else is happening here. Okay? Something else besides genetics, although genetics appears to have a role. What about another kind of disorder that is psychological in nature that has to do with how individuals behave in their environment? Obsessive compulsive disorder. What's the concordance there? Wow! A whopping 87% of the time, if one of a pair of monozygotic twins has OCD, the other one will also have OCD. It's only 47% for dizygotic twins. Now, this is a higher percentage. There's a strong genetic component here and a weak environmental component, which is the amount that's left over. What about mental health issues that have to do with social behavior, like drug abuse, drug dependence, patterns of taking drugs? What's the level of concordance here? Okay, now monozygotic twins have a higher concordance than dizygotic twins, indicating something interesting. Is there something to the notion that there may be some inherited genetics that have something to do with being prone to addiction? Well, quite possibly. But at the same time, the concordance rate overall is fairly low for both monozygotic twins and dizygotic twins. In the vast majority of cases, even for identical twins, when one twin has a diagnosis in the DSM manual, a psychological manual, for drug abuse or dependence, the other twin, even if it's genetically identical, monozygotic twin, it doesn't have it 3 out of 4 times, indicating that most of what's going on when it comes to drug abuse and dependence is about what is learned. And some have argued that actually drug abuse, drug addiction is in some perverse way a form of learning, the brain learning in an environment conditioned by a chemical. Okay, let's move away from biological conditions. Let's move away from psychological conditions to purely social behavior. Crime is the behavior of an individual who breaks a law. And in Denmark, when individuals break the law, they must register as criminals. And researchers, Sarnoff Mednick and Carl Christensen, looked at 6,000 pairs of male twins. And they asked the question, if one is in the criminal registry, is the other in the criminal registry in the country of Denmark? And they found concordance. Now, if you look at the relative difference between monozygotic twins and dizygotic twins, you'll find that the monozygotic twins are have a 3 times higher concordance rate than the dizygotic twins. 36% compared to 12%. So there's a big difference between monozygotic and dizygotic twins in their concordance in criminal behavior. On the other hand, the concordance rate is below 50% in all cases. So in all cases, less than half of the behavior of the second twin has to do with genetic similarity. Now, those are twin studies, but there's another kind of study out there called an adoption study, which attempts to control for environmental effects. So it does it this way. Imagine an adoption, and an adoption that happens at birth, so that biological parents never see their children. In cases where biological parents never see their children, can they nevertheless influence those children's outcomes? So in the following studies, the biological parents had no contact with their biological children. So how could a biological parent have an effect on a biological child? Through some kind of physical inheritance. How about schizophrenia? If a mother is diagnosed with schizophrenia, how often would offspring be diagnosed with schizophrenia? If we compare that to the prevalence of schizophrenia in children whose biological parents do not have schizophrenia. Both the children of biological children of those moms with schizophrenia and the biological children of the moms without schizophrenia were raised by non-schizophrenic parents, the parents who adopted them. Well, what kind of rate do you have? So in a literature review by Ingram and Ketty, one study by Heston indicated a rate of 16.6% of schizophrenia in children of biological mothers who had schizophrenia, 0% for normal mothers, non-schizophrenic mothers. Another study found a 32% rate of schizophrenia, a higher rate, but including milder forms of schizophrenia, which kind of explains that. When you have children of ill biological mothers who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but only an 18% rate for non-schizophrenic mothers. So it does seem that there is a higher rate of schizophrenia in children of mothers who have schizophrenia than in biological children of mothers who don't have schizophrenia, even when they've been adopted at birth. However, again, note that the rate, while it's higher for children of biological mothers, is not 100%. This is not an automatic condition that is transmitted. Something else is having an effect, even though biology does seem to co-vary with the appearance of illness in the child. Well, what if we head back to crime in adoption studies now, moving from mental health again to criminal behavior? Here we have a study in which we're talking about fathers and sons. This is Hutchings and Mednick again. So this is looking at biological fathers who never see their children, and the biological fathers can either be not criminal or criminal. And then the boys can be delinquent, the junior version of criminal, or not delinquent. So among the boys that are not delinquent, read these totals going down the column. Among the boys who were not delinquent, 69% had a biological father who was not criminal. And only 31% had a biological father who was criminal. Among the boys who were delinquent, now still a majority had a biological father who was not criminal, but it's a smaller majority. And a greater minority had a biological father who was criminal. 49% of delinquent boys had a biological father with a criminal record. Now that's a difference, if you're reading across the rows, of 18%. But only a difference of 18%, not a difference of 100%. So it does appear that biological fathers influence boys' criminality, even if they never see them. But it appears that they don't do so completely. In fact, the vast majority of the variation has to do with something in the environment. Let's continue the sociobiological argument with another paper by Mednick, this time with Gabrielli in the journal Science, where they're taking a look at the percent of sons who are convicted, the sons of biological parents who had them given away at birth. And if you look at the x-axis, you see the number of convictions of biological parents. Okay, so, and then there are three lines. The first line at the top is all criminal offenses. And then the line with the stars is property offenses. The lines with the circles is violent offenses. And it appears that for both property and violent offenses, although more strongly for property offenses than for violent offenses, as the number of convictions by biological parents, criminal convictions, goes up, the percent of sons of those biological parents who are convicted also goes up. That is what? It's a positive relationship. As one goes up, the other also goes up. Although you'll notice what the scale is here, right? There's a bit of a framing bias in this figure, which is taken from the Mednick and Gabrielli article. It only goes up to 30% on the y-axis scale. It should go up to 100%. And if it did go up to 100%, these lines would look a little bit flatter. We don't ever approach a percent conviction rate for sons of even 50%, not to mention 100%, even when biological parents have had 3 or more convictions, right? Most of the time, the biological children of parents who have convictions don't themselves have convictions. So your nature, your genetic heritage is associated to some degree, it seems, with your behavior, but it is not a certain sentence. In fact, most people escape it. How? Through some other means, through something in the environment, the life they lead away from their biological parents, who they have never seen. Finally, Mednick takes a look at Denmark again. Why Denmark? Because it's easy to get adoption records in Denmark. So, the percent of boys who have a criminal record in 4 circumstances, okay? If adoptive parents are not criminal, and biological parents are not criminal. If both of those things happen, both sets of parents are not criminal, the criminal record rate is just 13.5%. That's the lowest of the 4. On the other hand, if the adoptive parents are criminal and the biological parents are not criminal, there is an increase. There's an increase there in the criminality rate. It's a small one. What about if adoptive parents are not criminal, but biological parents are criminal? Well, then the criminality rate goes up from 13.5% to 20%, an increase of 7%. That's a big increase. It's not an increase up to 100% yet, and the rate does not go up to 100% when adoptive parents are criminal and biological parents are criminal. Even then, the rate only goes up to 24.5%. What's the lesson here? First of all, biological parents do appear to have some influence, even if they never meet their children, over boys' criminality. Second, though, adoptive parents do too. When adoptive parents are criminal, the children of those adoptive families are also more likely to be criminal. So both biological and adoptive parents matter. Both nature and nurture by parents matters. And third, none of it is leading to this conclusive 100% criminal record rate. What your parents do does not necessarily determine what you do. In fact, even when your biological parents are criminal, your adoptive parents are criminal, 3 out of 4 times, you, the child, will not be criminal. There's a lot to nurture, a lot beyond parents, and certainly a lot beyond biology, even if sociobiologists do demonstrate that there's something to the claim that having a biological heritage of a particular sort leads to an increased likelihood that you will follow your biological parents' record. Nature exists as a force. Nurture strongly trumps it.